Hello, everybody, and welcome to Free Spirit TV. My name is Aline, and I'm very delighted to present to you once more the well-known international spiritual teacher, best-selling author, and artist, Teal Swan. Teal is a survivor of severe childhood abuse. Today, after having integrated her own excruciating life experience, she inspires others to live an authentic, free, and joyful life. Her mission is the transformation of human suffering, and so she helps people around the world to become spiritually, mentally, and physically whole again. In our conversation today, we are going to talk about where humanity stands, where it is headed toward, and what we can do to live a fulfilling and joyful life. Well, hello, Teal, and welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you back on our show again. Thank you for taking the time.
It's wonderful to be here again.
Last time we've talked with each other, it has been 2017, so it's been a while. In the meantime, a lot of stuff has happened. It's been a crazy time, as we all know. And so I'm really excited to talk with you about humanity today, where it is standing at the moment, where it is headed toward, and of course, also what's interesting to know what every one of us can do to, despite the challenging times, create a more joyful and fulfilling life. So I will jump right into the first question.
Okay.
This is a personal one, but I'm really curious how you have actually experienced the last couple of years. I'm talking about the pandemic. What was your most uplifting and what was your worst experience in that time span? And what did you learn from it?
Woo, that's tolerant. Honestly, the last 2 years was probably the worst phase of my adult life. It was terrible. We'll go worst first, and then we'll go up. Okay,
That's a good idea.
Yeah, this year I had like an absolute trifecta. Last 2 years, where I experienced the perils of fame at a level that I've never experienced before. I was completely set up by a film team who said that they were entirely, for all of what we were doing, and managed to actually deceive all of us for 3 straight years. And they put out what turned out to be the biggest hit piece ever done on me. As part of that, I was betrayed by the person I was closest to in this world and lost an 18-year relationship with that person. And I'm now going to be embroiled in a very long lawsuit over what has happened. So,
oh no.
And on top of all that, at the exact same time, I ended up having to have a hysterectomy. And not only that, when I was just barely recovering, I went on European tour, and the surgical site ripped open. So I ended up in Germany in a hospital overseas in the middle of my European tour. And I couldn't afford to stop it. So I had to pull myself onto every single stage across Europe, despite that. Yeah, it was bad, like really, really bad.
Yeah, I believe that. That's great. Yeah,
as far as I haven't had a lot of positive moments, honestly, over the last 2 years. A lot of it has been just like really simple moments. It's not like anything really amazing and good happened. It's more like I found more of an appreciation for little things, like cooking with my son, or taking a walk in the snow, or how good a cup of tea tastes.
That's nice. Yeah.
What I like about all of this, though, is that, besides obviously different things that I'm going to be doing in my career, I think what I learned the most throughout all of this experience was like a deeper commitment to what it is that I do. Because like this year I was thrust into this position of really having to ask myself, do I want to continue with this? That bad. It was bad enough that I was like, I don't know whether what I'm doing is worth it. Re-examining that, though, which everybody has to do at some point in their career, I think, re-examining all of that made me realize that what I'm doing is something that I can't not do. So, staring down this road of, potentially having there be so much against me that I will never make it to where I want to make it. It made me question, well, okay, if that outcome never happens, what is my relationship to what I'm doing? And what I realized is I'm unconditionally committed to this.
Thanks God. Yeah.
So it's like, and like, what's good about that is that even though it's quite sobering, it puts you in this place where it doesn't really matter. Like the outcome matters less to me right now, honestly, than it did before. I'm less attached to what people are saying or not saying about me as well, because it doesn't matter whether it goes this way or this way. I'm still doing this. So I think it's like grounded me somewhere deeper in my career and somewhere that's much more unshakable, which is good, but it has not been enjoyable, and I am definitely not on the other side of it.
Well, that's a really nice and beautiful message. I think that you're really so committed because you have helped so many people. That would be a shame if you stop what you're doing. Thank you so much. Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the world right now. Also, the last couple of years, it was pretty hard time, I guess, for many people. And I was wondering if you have done some research on or what you believe was the reason why people or humanity as a whole needed to go through this form of a challenge. Talking about the measures, about the masks, about the closing of businesses, the separation of the people. Do you have an idea of why?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, humanity was a match to this entire thing and therefore needed to go through the entire thing because of their narcissistic way of being. And I know this is not a very popular opinion that I share with people, but humanity is locked in a narcissistic state. It's one of the downsides of being so self-conscious. And we could say that the human species is a particularly self-conscious species. But when you can create such a strong concept of self, you fall into all the shadows of the ego. And narcissism is one of those, which is the inability to take that which is other as a part of the self. Mm-hmm. Now, that's a very, very dangerous state to be in because of what it invites in a universe that is based off of the law of mirroring. Mm-hmm. You're seeing this narcissism play out within our relationships. You're seeing this narcissism play out with our relationship with the greater world as well, which is going to invite all kinds of things like pandemics. Mm-hmm. And what I want people to understand is it doesn't matter which side of the fence you're on, whether this is a man-created thing or whether this is a, natural virus that just decided to, make us the host. Mm-hmm. It is still the result of a narcissistic way of being. If we are not able to take others as a part of the self and therefore start to behave in a way that is symbiotic with the things around us, then those things will not behave in a symbiotic way around us, whether it's our, other people who are not behaving in a symbiotic way mm-hmm. around us, which we saw in such an extreme way during this pandemic, or whether it is another species. Mm. And like it's quite interesting because you see this dynamic relationship that humans have with the bacterial world and, the fungal world and the viral world, which we really don't have a handle on. Like we're pretty egotistical in the way that we interact with the world, right? We think that we've got it. We think that we can tame everything that is for our own personal benefit. And we're going to be in for it if we continue to walk through the world with this mentality. So what you saw is humanity becoming a match to the reflections of their narcissistic state. Mm-hmm. And by virtue of seeing that reflection, either becoming aware of it and stepping out of that and starting to develop a more symbiotic relationship with other people, or even going deeper into the shadow. Mm-hmm. And mm-hmm. that was what I found to be the most depressing, honestly, is that humanity chose to go even deeper into the shadow of narcissism and separation.
Really? That was my next question, actually. If you would have sensed that people, by going through these circumstances, became more aware of themselves and were able to transform their issues to such an extent that we are not going to be a match again to these restricting orders, or if you think, no, that was just the beginning.
Oh, that was just the beginning. But mm-hmm. I don't want to, right now we're sort of speaking in generalizations, right? So mm-hmm. there are definitely more than a few people who,
yeah, of course,
this was really their awakening. But if you want to generalize about humanity as a whole, mm-hmm. no, we went deeper into the shadow. We're a match to even more. And this is just the baby beginning. And when we had to vote with our own actions and thoughts, we voted for separation. Mm-hmm. So, honestly, right now, it's hard to do these types of interviews about the prognosis of the world, right? Because what I am, seeing everything that I see, is a long-term optimist, short-term pessimist.
Okay. I'm in the same boat. Yeah, I see it like that too.
Humanity really needs to awaken, and it's no longer a luxury. I mean, humanity has been treating awakening and awareness like a luxury. It is not a luxury if it wants to survive.
Mm.
The thing is that humanity as a whole behaves the same as a single person, where a person may need different measures, right, to awaken. And honestly, the story of humanity was already written by 2015 here, in terms of what we're headed towards.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was around the 2012 years that humanity as a whole, as a collective, was deciding upon their future. And we were really at a crossroads between going deeper into our shadow or really stepping into this golden age of awakening. And humanity at that point was unable to transcend their own shadows, which means that in a universe based off of the law of mirroring, it's an invitation for an even bigger escalation of awareness. So what that means is it gets worse, you know, and like I use this term when I teach a lot, which is the whack a tree at 70 miles an hour moment, right? A lot of people, in order to find their awakening or find their truth or all these positive things that we could be talking about, they have to get in a car accident or experience a serious illness or lose somebody that they love, or, I mean, go through something that's truly jarring, something that puts them at this ground level place where they have to reevaluate everything. And from there, you can see some really beautiful things born out of that. But, you know, my issue, of course, being part of the human race, is that it seems like the escalations keep happening, but like a person who's truly resistant to that awakening, it's like we even double down on the original reason why we got into the thing. So it's an invitation for even more escalation, and that's what humanity is headed towards.
And this resistance will stay the way it is, or do you think there are people that are just becoming more aware also of their resistance, or do you think
of course there are people, there are definitely people who are becoming more aware. Like there are people who are more sensitive than others. You know, some people you have to put a whole lot of pressure on them for them to have a aha moment. Other people, it's like a little tap, you know?
Yeah.
But, you know, when I'm talking about humanity, I'm talking about the whole of humanity. And, you know, all you got to do is to go on a walk down a basic street, you know, to get a snapshot of just the people in your area, and then ask yourself, okay, if I was to take all of these people just on this one street and put them together and generalize about them, what do I think is the truth? And it doesn't take us very long to decide that, you know, we're not a particularly aware species, despite our intellect.
Yeah, that's interesting, actually. Yeah. So from your work, I know that you are able to travel outside of your body and also read the fields, right? You can read the vibrations and frequencies of things and countries, maybe also continents. And I was wondering if you have been out of your body lately, traveling and looking at the frequencies. And if so, what were you observing regarding Europe? What kind of vibration does Europe have right now, and what's up in the next months for Europe?
I've been dragging my feet about this. It's like at the end of the year, which is where we are, I always do this it's like a next year blog, right? My predictions for the next year. And I have been avoiding it.
Oh.
So I can't say that I've like deliberately gone out and looked specifically at this. However, it's obviously when you go out of body and you're looking at the earth in general, which I do quite often, you definitely see some things. So there are some dominant things that are definitely coming up for Europe as a continent, right? The dominant vibration around Europe right now is stasis. That's where everybody's headed, and that's where everybody's getting to. This is pairing with some really interesting things on like a social political level, because it's what it looks like is that Europe is kind of caught between this rivalry that's starting to happen between China and America over world power. And because of it, it's almost like we have a word actually here. I don't know whether it like translates well, but we call it hamstrung. It's almost like when you can't make a move because you're caught between these two countries. And so Europe very much, when you're out of body, looks like that. But the stasis that is being created, even on that more political and social level, goes much, much deeper and much more personal. Because with Europe in general, Europe has managed to make life comfortable enough that people can stay in their dysfunction.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm torn about it. This is why I'm torn about it, because I love that Europe has managed to create a quality of life, honestly, that other countries have not been able to create for the basic citizen. I am the kind of person who would love every person to be able to experience those types of things and not to struggle and suffer to the degree that they do around the world. Right. At the same time, if you make life comfortable enough, people tend to stay in their dysfunction because their dysfunction doesn't get so painful they have to change it.
Yeah.
And that is, when you look at the whole of Europe, that stasis is where they are. Let's stay in our dysfunction. Let's keep things as they are. Nothing's going to move forward. And therefore, it's like there's almost like a halt to expansion. And with Europe, it's even more interesting than this, because it's like Europe is so well educated, but that education is not really moving them forward. It's like, what's the point of the education then? So that makes me nervous, I have to be honest. The reason stasis makes me nervous is because I understand the greater universe, and the greater universe really is interested in expansion. So stasis, and being in a state of stasis, is an invitation for the escalation to come from outside. And that is what I am watching, is the escalation coming from outside, whether it's China, Russia, or the United States, or the influx of immigration. Again, another very complex subject that I don't have a perfect answer to, because would we want all people, especially if they come from horrifically war-torn areas, to be able to come somewhere where they can have a good quality of life? Yes. What happens when those people breed to the degree that they take over and eradicate the cultures that exist in those countries? And that is what Europe is facing.
It's tragic, but yeah, I see it. I see your point. And how does it look for other continents? Is it similar or is it very different? Let's say for America or Asia, Africa.
It's different. I mean, we could be here all day long if I go through every single country, but I think the most important thing to understand is that every country right now, because the universe itself is escalating everything, every country is experiencing and going to experience an escalation of their shadow. So, with the US, it's this absolute grappling for power, like power mongering, for example, and, racism and poor education. That's more of what we're going to see out of there. For somewhere like Brazil, you've got desperation, which is the dominant vibration that people are going to be dealing with down there. A lot of poverty, increased poverty, in fact. Africa's pretty interesting. I can't go through every country, but okay, Africa's my last one. Africa is pretty interesting to watch right now because they have such, like, the whole continent, right, has such an intense vibration of declinism that's going on there, which is that the people on this continent believe things will get worse to such an extreme degree. There's almost like a futility that's setting in. So that's going to increase. And obviously, when somebody's in that state, they're going to take different actions, and those actions may bring about the very thing they're afraid about, which is a worsening conditions. So each one of these countries essentially is experiencing a different thing. But humanity as a whole is confronting their own narcissistic state. So relationships is the theme for humanity, no matter where they are in the world.
The overall theme. Yeah, that's really important that we look at that. And that's what you're doing with your work. And that's why I'm so grateful for it. And I was actually watching your synchronization workshop you were holding in Switzerland this summer. And I was really happy that you pointed out that the Germanic people here in Switzerland, Germany, Austria have such a hard time with their feelings and emotions. I could not agree more on that. And I was wondering if you know what is actually the reason that we have such a hard time with our emotions and feelings.
Well, the story about the German relationship to feelings and emotions started actually long before the war, but was greatly exacerbated by the war. What I mean by this is that there was a clash between Germanic values, right, and feelings. So let's look at, in the very beginning, we got to go way, way back. I'm talking thousands, if not, let's go hundreds of years ago. If you look at the Germanic cultures and what was happening in terms of citizen life on a day-to-day basis, what you find in any culture is that a culture's values arise from their needs, right? So if you watch the Germanic people and you watch their needs, you start to see these values come up, like sensibility, like a sense of order, like wanting respect, right? And many of these things that were dominant values within the Germanic race they thought were a contradiction to emotionality. Like if my emotions are strong, then I can't be as sensible. And sensibility is what allows me to farm the farm like I need to. You know, if I'm getting overly emotional, then I don't want to go out and plow the field, but I have to. Otherwise, it's going to snow. It's going to be an issue for me. So they thought that, of course, not understanding how to regulate emotion, not understanding the purpose of emotion, they thought that it was a contradiction. So they would have raised their children essentially away from their emotions. It doesn't matter how you feel, doesn't matter what you want, this is what needs to happen. So then on top of that, you add this horrible World War II experience where honestly the German people were broken and lost their capacity to be validated by the world in their emotions. I mean, they became bad guy number one. Doesn't matter whether you were involved or not, you know. So if a person who's part of these Germanic cultures is the bad guy, then all of a sudden it doesn't matter how you feel. We don't care how you feel. You messed up. And now have fun spending the rest of your life making up for this, you know? So it's actually ironic because it's like the Germanic people were dehumanized as a consequence of them dehumanizing others, right?
Yeah. Mirror.
Yeah, but like you can't be dehumanized by the rest of the world, and you can't have so much dehumanization happening internally between people, which does happen even between parents and their children, without a person developing 0% relationship with their own emotions.
Yeah. So they cut themselves off the emotions to cope with the situation they were in.
I mean, you could say that, but I'm not even going there. I'm going to the point where, like, I mean, let's look at a German child today. A German child today is born with the idea that they are wrong and bad. They are taught that in school.
Yeah, that's true.
There's no way to embrace the self when you're feeling that much shame about the self. Now, if you've got parents and children who are all in this vibration of shame, there's already an automatic resistance to the self. And at the core of the self is emotions. So when a small, German child comes up to their parent even or a teacher and says, I don't feel happy, the automatic response that is made is to turn against the emotion. Well, all of those things don't matter. What matters is this thing, and usually that's a sense of rightness, right? So in those cultures, the attachment to doing what is right is so extreme. It's so extreme that anything that goes against it, whether it's a way that somebody thinks or a way that somebody feels, is automatically invalidated. Doesn't get to exist. So then the child is no longer dealing with what is real about themselves, and they develop the same behaviors towards their own emotions. So then, like, let's say that I'm dealing with a German adult. They've got an internal aspect of themselves that is turning against their emotion. And it's kind of playing the role that those early adults played in their life, even though the parents are gone.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. And for the Swiss, it's similar, but not the same, I guess, because we haven't had this cultural background like the German, but still we have a hard time expressing and being open and vulnerable to our feeling states, I feel.
A lot of that is because of the German values. And a lot of that was influenced by even religions. I mean, when people want to know why they are the way they are in modern life, I can't even tell you how far back you have to look, and people don't even realize it, because I could be talking to somebody who's not religious at all, has never been to church, and they don't realize how much they've been influenced by Christian ideology. And when you get the influx of the Christian religions, you've got an influx of values. And if those values are counterintuitive or counterproductive to emotions, or they think that they are, then emotions are made the enemy. And, the Christian church made an enemy, honestly, when they came in. All of the Christian religions made an enemy of primal urges, which included emotions.
Mm.
So
is it the same for the whole of Europe, or do you see the differences there too?
There are differences. There are definitely differences. Yeah.
Mm. Okay. Yeah, I was wondering because you're an expert on human suffering, and I was wondering about when you were traveling Europe this year, what was striking you the most about our suffering here in this continent? Like, is there something hidden in the subconscious that is really creating suffering and pain for us that we're just not aware of it? And how can we become more aware of these shadows?
Well, remember how we were talking about that addiction to what's right?
Mm-hmm.
I see that as a European shadow in an extreme way. It's just that the Germans get the gold medal.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
they do a lot. Yeah,
that addiction to rightness is something that is a shadow that most of the people in Europe are not aware of, and they're not aware of how much it is damaging them. So, and it's making them rather rigid, which is opposite. I mean, it's not very European, honestly. I mean, what was and is pretty wonderful about the whole European region is this openness. I mean, there are more people traveling there than anywhere else in the world, right? So you would think that the introduction to all these different cultures and different ways of being, it kind of creates like a groovy attitude that would make you a little bit more open. But what we see instead is the shadow of, it must be this way. This is what's right. This is what's wrong. Anything else I'm not going to consider type of thinking. And I see that across Europe. But, that's a shadow that I just want the Europeans to become totally aware of, because it's damaging their own personal lives and could potentially damage the world. So besides that, honestly, my European tour this time was shocking.
Okay.
It was absolutely shocking because Europe is probably my favorite place. Okay. I mean, you can't hate Europe, right? I absolutely love it. So I've been there a lot over the course of my career. And this time it was like stepping off of the plane into a different universe. And I feel like it's obviously very jarring for Europeans themselves who experienced the last 2 years, but they acclimatized to those changes gradually. When you haven't been there, like me, from a different country, and then went there, I could not believe it. It was like no matter where I went across Europe, people had forgotten how to interact with each other. No eye contact.
Yeah.
There is a cold emptiness that had settled over Europe, and that community feeling was gone. So connection, of course, is the antidote to this, but that shadow is something that I feel like people haven't really seen because they have managed to adapt, unfortunately, to that reality.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Is it the same for the south of Europe, or is it a little bit different there from the emotional part? I think they're a little bit more emotional and passionate about emotions.
Yeah, they're totally. Yes. Italians don't seem to have as much of an issue with emotions. Neither do the Spanish.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, it's different. Yeah, but the connection thing has been lost in Europe, and I need that to come back, right? But when they decided to impose all of these orders in Europe, they definitely took the right approach, which was rightness.
Yes.
Are you going to do it spiritually right? And Europe is like, yes. Wait. Now we're all suffering. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty huge trap.
Yeah.
Good, you pointed that out. Thank you. And what would you say when you look at human as a whole? What is it actually striving for? Kind of like the meaning of life or purpose of life?
That's an interesting question, because the way that you put it, I would say that meaning is what humanity is after. Human beings are meaning obsessed. It's like they need it in order to feel a sense of anything, right?
Yeah.
And if they don't find it inherently in the things they experience, they invent it.
Yeah, they make it up, right?
Yeah.
I know it for myself. Yeah, it's interesting.
So a person cannot, and the thing is like it's not like I'm wanting to lead people in the direction of letting go of this attachment to meaning. I would rather people be conscious of the fact that they need to be conscious of the fact that potentially they're inventing it, and to deliberately come up with the meaning in a way that serves their life and other people. I mean, that would be a healthy way of going about it, but I have never met a human being that is able to function well in life with zero meaning. It's a human need.
It's difficult for the mind, right? He always wants meaning. But it steers away sometimes from the feeling states. Yeah, I feel the interpretations.
I mean, you could potentially say that, right? I need people to understand that they are, if you were to make it really simple, I'm totally oversimplifying here, but if you were to make it super simple, mankind is a manifestation of the mind of God. So what we call God or source or universal energy, whatever you want to call it, right? This giant collective consciousness has fragmented itself into these different aspects, and humanity is essentially a child of itself that is birthed from the energy of the mind of source. So you see the qualities of the thinking aspect of source consciousness inherent in the human. And while it's important to experience these different states of being and maybe be able to step outside of that, humanity is a tool for the mind of source. So when it is trying to find meaning, that is source itself attempting to find meaning through the physical human. So I would not want people to go into resistance.
No, yeah, that's important to mention that. Yeah, that happens sometimes in the spiritual field, right? That then they switch and go in resistance to the mind, and it's not going to work either.
This drives me nuts, man. This drives me nuts.
Yeah.
There is actually, yes. I'm glad you said that. The spiritual field is in resistance to the mind, and that's so sad because it's such an incredibly beautiful tool, one that can absolutely serve your spiritual progression and serve your life. So,
yeah, it must be. It's kind of part of us, so it must be helpful somehow. Yeah. And let's talk a little bit about fulfillment and joy, something that's kind of missing right now, I feel. What would you say is the basis of living a fulfilled and joyful life?
Living according to your values. Okay, so a value is essentially something that a person wants or needs. It's something that we hold to be important, and it's going to be so different for each person based off of our individual selves and our individual life experience.
Yeah.
Life fulfillment and joy goes out the window the minute that somebody is not living according to their values. And I'm going to tell you the majority of people aren't, honestly. The majority of people are not living according to their actual conscious values, which is why they're miserably unhappy.
Right.
So just so people can kind of understand this, if my value is security, right? But I keep making a decision to take risks, I'm not living according to my value. I'm not going to be happy then. So a happy life is about people figuring out what matters and what is the most important to them, and then aligning their thoughts, words, and actions with those things that they find to be the most important. And the reason that I say this is how to create a fulfilling life is because we know that life has ups and downs, right? You can't hang on to happiness. That's what people are like. All people are trying to do that. They just want to get out of the contrast. It's like, I just want to hold on to this happiness and stay in this state. And that is not the reality of the life that we are experiencing. So what we need to anchor into is something that is deeper. And that thing that is deeper is what is important. Because this opens the doorway for us to be able to experience difficult things, but not lose our sense of lust for the world, if you will. People can endure a huge amount of pain, actually, if they're living according to their values, without registering it as extremely painful. So I would say that living according to your values is what makes a person the most resilient. But obviously, I mean, if you're living according to what's important and what matters to you, then that's where you're going to find the most emotional satisfaction. So you're increasing the likelihood that you experience these higher states of being, or the ones that we're always wanting to experience, whether it's pleasure or those moments of joy or those types of things.
Yeah, I think that's really important, to become really aware individually what it is, right?
Yeah.
Create that. And that doesn't mean that we will not take risks, right? Because you mentioned now, if someone has a value of security, if he really follows this inner voice and compass, he will be also able to take risks that are a match to him or her, right?
I mean, potentially that was the wrong example to use, because life implies some measure of risk. But what I'm wanting people to understand with these analogies about living according to different values is that you can't do it and live a happy life at the same time, no matter what that value is. So should I come up with another example to make it make more sense?
Yes, if you have one. Yeah.
All right. Let's say that what I value is being able to do what I want with my time. But I get a phone call from a friend, and then a phone call from another friend. And like every person that calls me wants me to do something specifically for them. And every single time I let go of what I want to do, I let go of what inspires me, and I go and I help the other person. If helping others is not my jam, meaning it's not my highest value, and I go do that, I'm going to experience a decrease in life satisfaction. So I would have to align my energy with, doing what I want with my time in order for me to experience life satisfaction. And another, like mine could be that, and another person's could be, oh, I just love helping people. So they would have a totally different reaction. They get a phone call from this person, that person, this person. And every time they say yes, they feel better and better because they're making the choice according to what they value. That's sort of what I was getting at with the value thing.
Yeah, I see. What I meant before, maybe I didn't communicate it clearly. Sometimes it's misunderstood. If someone thinks that the value is security, for example, not to take any risk at all anymore. You know what I mean? They think they have to stay like hide themselves or stay just still and not move anymore. That's sometimes a thing that I observe. These misunderstandings of these concepts.
Well, yeah. Welcome to this line of work.
I know. Yeah.
No, if somebody's in that position, it's less about, you don't really focus about taking or not taking risks. You focus on what is it that I specifically need in order to feel a sense of security.
Right.
A sense of security is complex, right? For this person, it might have nothing to do with finances and have entirely to do with relationships. And so then, your energy is going towards establishing security in a relationship. For this person, it's this much money. For another person, it's a completely different number that they need to see in their bank account. So our actions are defined by, essentially our definition of security.
Yeah. And your mission is to transform human suffering. And in your childhood, you were harmed enormously and experienced also a lot of pain, and you were able to heal all of this. And what would you say was the most important key for you being able to transform your traumas? Was there a key that stuck out for you? Were you saying this was the most important thing I have learned or I had to administer at that moment?
Yeah, but my answer is going to suck.
Okay. But let's skip this question. Good. No.
I think the most important thing was to take my power out of other people's hands. What I mean by that is that when you first get out of the amount of trauma that somebody like me went through, the level of unfairness that you have to face is indescribable. You're looking around the world and you're feeling like everybody else is in a better space. And everybody else has a better family situation. And, I remember, because I was a professional athlete for a lot of years, this was one of the hardest things for me because, I was going into the police offices having to do scar mappings and answer questions after every workout that I had, when my other teammates could just go watch a TV show, and getting into the emotional states that I was grappling with, and also dealing with all of the, emotional and physical and mental aftermath it was so not fair. It's not fair. You know, for me, it was speed skating. Okay. For me, it was not fair that this little boy from Wisconsin who has a fine family life can just go plop himself in front of a television, and me, I'm having to sit in this room and deal with all of these issues that he doesn't have to face. So of course he's got the advantage, right? Mm-hmm. And there was a part of me that desperately wanted rescue. I wanted somebody, because I felt powerless, I wanted somebody to do something about it, to make it right. And got progressively more and more upset at the fact that it just was not happening. And it's almost like you get to this crossroads where you can go down this road or this road. Going down this road, you give up on humanity and you're like, screw life. Mm-hmm. Because this is not, what happened to me is not okay. And nobody's doing anything about it, which makes me hate them worse, which is just a secondary trauma, right? Or you realize, it's almost like you have this epiphany moment, which is not a fun one. It's hard to swallow, which is, okay, so let's assume that nobody's going to. What then? And what it leaves you with is like the only option you have is to take you that you're putting in other people's hands back, to be like, what do I do with what I have from where I am right now? And like, honestly, that was the key to everything, because I thought about this in the way of not wanting to be powerless anymore. It wasn't about other people anymore. I started to make it about me and the life that I want. Mm-hmm. I'm sick of feeling like I have no power over the way that I feel in my life. So taking my power back in that way and figuring out what I could do from where I was took a lot of different forms. I mean, it's like we're approaching the holiday season, right now, or maybe we're right in it. In the holiday season, like, this is an example. Holidays are quite difficult for people who have experienced abuse, especially in their childhood. And I hated, capital H, hated Christmas.
But now you love it. Yeah.
Well, because that's what I'm talking about. So I basically, what I realized is that my hatred of Christmas was because I have a passive relationship with Christmas. Mm-hmm. My relationship was about what other people did for my whole life, right? Mm-hmm. So taking your life back, right, is about these incremental steps, even relative to something like Christmas. So what I did is I was like, you know what? Let's just take the image of a whiteboard and just wipe the idea of Christmas off it. Like, it's gone. I'm at a blank slate. What do I want it to be? So I start researching it. What is it about? What was the original intention? Mm-hmm. What are some of the cool traditions? What do different cultures do? And it's like I started to invent these puzzle pieces and put together my Christmas, something that I love, something that I'm completely in charge of making happen. Now it's like my favorite time of year. I mean, December 1st comes along and I'm, the whole house is like
decorated.
Yeah, I mean, that's just one example. I did that relative to everything. And that was the turning point for me recovering from trauma, was to be like, all right, I'm at the ground level. If I'm going to take myself out of people's hands and I'm going to put my thoughts and actions towards what I want, because there's nothing else to do in life, right? That's what life is about. You manifest what you want by putting your thought and your energy into it completely. What am I going to put my thoughts and energy into? And gradually what happens is, just like planting a garden, these sprouts start to come up, and pretty soon you're in a forest, a forest of your making. And that's the life that you want to live.
That's very powerful. I see the picture. Yeah, it's really great. So it's about freedom of choice, really, and the empowerment.
Yeah. And freedom of choice, I can't state this enough for people who have been through trauma, especially abuse. Freedom of choice is absolutely everything, because that's what it feels like you lacked your whole life.
Yeah, it's true. So you're also a teacher of authenticity, which I find really great. There are not many out there, I think. And I would like to know from you, how does authenticity play into healing and being more self-loving?
Well, you can't do anything with something that's not real. If I was to distill authenticity down, it is what is real about you. Of course, that what is real about you can sometimes change based off of life experiences or whatever else. However, you have to work with what is real if you want to get anywhere, right? If we're not being authentic, we're not being real. It's So I mean, it's like the two concepts are so enmeshed with one another, and should be. It's like difficult for me to comprehend people not getting that, you know? I have to be honest, right? Authenticity. I have to be honest about how I feel and why I feel that way in order to know what proactive steps I need to take to change the way that I feel or to change my life so that I feel differently, right?
Right.
But when we talk about self-love or something like that, there is no self to love without authenticity. What are you even in a relationship with? So, and then I have to know myself to love myself. I really wish people understood that you have to know something to love something, right? We've got this idea that love is some sort of abstract, emotional, positive feeling you feel towards something. It's not. I can't love a jellyfish without knowing a jellyfish. Why? Because if I don't know the jellyfish, I don't understand they need to be in water. If I love a jellyfish, I may go pick it up out of the water and squish it to death, right? And that's the type of dysfunctional love that we're showing ourselves and other people. So if I have to know myself, that's the authenticity piece. I have to know what's real about me and for me in order to respond in a loving way towards myself.
Yeah, it's kind of the starting point for everything, right? I mean,
yes.
Empowerment, authenticity.
Yes.
What comes first? Or is it, I don't know.
To know what is real comes first.
Yeah.
To see what is your first step for everything.
Yeah. And what do you think people fear the most regarding being authentic? What's your observation?
Social consequence.
Yes.
Okay, so human beings are a social species. I'm going to say it again. I've said it 100,000 times. People have got to understand that they are a social species. It is as ridiculous for a person to think that they can just exist as an island as it is to think that a cow is going to thrive by itself. It's not. It's a herd animal, right? We are a group species, and connection is the way that we survive. And I do not want people to take this for granted because it is so serious. It is baked into your biology. If I take a little baby and I put him outside, that baby is dead. End of story.
Right.
So we are relationally dependent on one another. And in our adult life, even when we move beyond that more physical dependency, we cannot emotionally and mentally thrive without people. Now that I've said that, obviously, if this is the case for the physical human, what is also baked into our biology is the need to be in alignment or confluence with the people around us. Conflict is a threat to our survival and a threat to our sense of emotional well-being. So what we're afraid of about being honest or authentic or true is that it's going to align us with conflict. Instead of experiencing that confluence, there's going to be social consequences, whether it's attack or whether it's punishment or whether it's abandonment or whether it's being stigmatized. I mean, all of these are social consequences. That is the number one thing that keeps people away from authenticity. What I need, though, is for people to understand we are in a world right now with 8 billion people. You're no longer living in a tribe of 5 in the middle of the wilderness. It is totally possible for you to find a place that you are genuinely compatible with and people you are genuinely compatible with. And the only way that you're going to do that is by being authentic. So people have to, in order to break free of this terror of social consequence around authenticity, they have to look down the other devil's eye. And to look that other devil in the eye is to see that there are also social consequences and personal consequences for being inauthentic.
Yeah. And what would you suggest to do if someone is so afraid of this consequence? Just incrementally taking the steps or getting together with other people and learn it? Or what is your approach?
My first approach is to work with whatever their resistance is first and always. My favorite way to do this is through direct access, where we work with whatever part of themselves is protecting them by maintaining confluence and avoiding authenticity. Now, then you bring up the part of them that wants to be authentic. And now it's almost like you're acting as a relationship counselor between these two parts of themselves, so as to find an agreement. Now, that agreement is going to look like a win-win for both parts. Something that's a yes for the part that's afraid, and a yes for the part that's really wanting something, right? And that's when we start the experimentation phase, where let's say that what agreement we came to is, I still want to have a sort of fake relationship with my parents because I know they're not going to change and I'm not ready to lose the relationship. So I'll have a fake relationship with my parents. However, I'm going to go out and socially, I'm going to get in the practice of, whenever I feel like my truth is not perfectly in alignment with somebody else's truth, I'll express it in this way instead of hiding it, for example. So it's that point, basically, it's not until you come to an agreement between the parts of the self, so you're not bulldozing any aspect of the self, that you then pick some kind of a practice action that is in alignment with authenticity.
Okay. Yeah, parts work is anyway something great to try it out. I would always suggest that. Is it kind of a key for when you feel like you're afraid of something and another part you want something, that always parts work just is something to go to, right?
I think so. I mean, you've seen me over the last 4 years teach a lot more about this dynamic parts work, because I did not realize in the beginning of my career that people didn't get that they are fragmented.
Yeah.
And I think when people wrap their head around the fact that they've got these different parts of self, it almost like opens the door to be their own relationship counselor, but for their own internal parts. And it creates the internal peace everybody's looking for. By the way, I didn't realize that people didn't understand this about what the psyche is doing until I had a conversation with somebody about what internal peace was. Somebody asked, what is internal peace? And like my answer, in response to my answer, this person was like oh no. Like, because it just makes absolute sense. When you understand internally, you're fragmented into these different parts and they have all these different relationships, including serious conflict relationships. If you resolve the conflict between these two parts of self, you experience internal peace. Ooh. And I was like, wait a minute, we got to start talking about fragmentation a lot. So I did that. But yeah, I think that parts work is I cannot stress how amazing of a tool it is for the average person. I mean, anybody can do this. You don't have to be spiritually minded to do this.
No. Yeah. I love it too. It's great. And it reduces the resistance so much. Because but you have to have the a really aware and of course not so resistant approach to actually do this work. Otherwise it's not going to work, right? So, but it's to get to know oneself on this level.
We were talking about this like authenticity. We were talking about it earlier. It's crazy when you go into a part and you dive into that one part.
Yeah.
Stuff you learn about yourself, the stuff that makes sense suddenly, you're like, whoa, wow, now I get me,
Now I understand it finally. Yeah, it's great. What you also talk about sometimes, and I love a lot, you talk about spiritual traps. Let's just briefly touch on that subject real quick, because I find it so important, and there are not many teachers that teach these traps. I don't know, maybe it's because they're not aware of them. I don't know. What would you say is the most dangerous spiritual trap there is, and how can we avoid falling into it?
Can I pick two?
Yes, of course.
I've got two that pretty much tie for first place.
Okay, great.
The first is, oh crap, no, I've got more than that. Okay.
You can also bring 3 or 4. That's fine.
Okay. Thank you. The first one that I have is bypassing in general. That is rampant in the spiritual field, which is the use of spiritual concepts so as to bypass something that needs attention. And you see this in the intentional manifestation communities, I think, the very most. Because a lot of those people, if they're honest with you, the reason they get into spirituality is just so that they feel better. And I'm telling you, the spiritual path is going to run you up against whether you want to know the truth or whether you just want to feel good. So there are people that are like, oh, I want to know the truth, even if it sucks, right? And there are people who are like, no, thank you, and when people are not yet to that crossroads, or when people would choose this direction on that crossroads, they tend to just over jump everything with their spiritual practice and do a lot of damage because of it, not only to themselves but to relationships. So spiritual bypassing, I did a whole video on that one on YouTube. That's one of my top picks. Second top pick would be to feel like you know everything and no longer question yourself.
Oh, great.
I don't care who you are. I don't care whether you are an absolute master. There is nobody who is genuinely enlightened that would ever say that they know everything, because no matter what, not even Source is aware of what it doesn't know that it doesn't know.
Right.
So you have to leave serious leeway for your own unconscious, regardless of how much you see, which is difficult to do, especially when you see so much, right? And I see a lot of people in the spiritual field, they have medicine journeys, or, they do Vipassana retreats, and they come back like, I'm awakened. I'm in the space where I know everything. Like, never go there,
For how long? Yeah.
I mean, I talk a lot, right? Don't get me wrong. But like, I have gotten to a place, honestly, over the last 10 years where, I've told a lot of people in my community, it's almost like the more you know, the more silent you want to get.
Yeah.
So that one. And then the other one that I would pick is a major one that most spiritual people do not see, is rejecting of the temporal self. And I even see this shadow of the spiritual field baked into whole spiritual ideologies, if not religions. It's almost like we use our spiritual practice directly against our physical self, directly against our needs, directly against our identity or ego. It's not an integrated philosophy. And what is necessary is to bring the non-physical together in partnership and integration with the physical. And I don't think that spiritual people do that very well, because they often get to their spiritual practice because of so much temporal pain. It solves as an entire tool of resistance to the temporal.
Yeah. Because they have an idea how they want to be, and then it starts right there with the resistance.
Yeah.
Do you have another one? Oh, no. Sorry.
I could be here for the length of the Bible, but those are my three main ones.
Okay, great. Good. Then let's see. Spiritual community and shadow. What would you say? Or was it that the answer actually? What's the biggest shadow in the spiritual community? Is these 3 points, right?
Yeah.
And what would actually be a healthy approach towards our shadows?
Oh, not just that. Can I add something?
Yes, of course.
So, I mean, you asked the question in a bit of a different way, and for whatever reason, when you asked that question in a different way, it brought up like a different.
I see.
Honestly, I feel like the biggest shadow within the spiritual field and community itself is that spirituality can become like one giant coping mechanism. Coping is an interesting thing, because a lot of psychologists and a lot of spiritual teachers talk about coping as if it's a positive thing. And I'm not going to say it's always negative. Maybe there is a situation that you can't change no matter what you do, and so you have to adapt to the stressor.
Yeah.
The thing is that coping by definition is an antagonist to change. Because to cope with something is to make an adaptation to a stressor, not change the stressor itself, because there is a baseline assumption that the stressor cannot change. In our waking adult life, the amount of times that we run into a situation where we cannot change the stressor itself is so slim. I don't know why we're even talking about it anymore. Okay. So basically, if what we're doing in response to every stressor is simply coping, and that could take the form of anything. Coping with meditation, coping with positive focus, coping with shadow work. Doesn't matter what you look at. You could cope with literally anything. We may very well run the risk of using spirituality as a coping mechanism rather than changing the issues and stressors themselves. That is the biggest shadow. If I was to generalize about the entire spiritual community worldwide, that is what I would say.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's always when it kind of tends to one extreme, it's always the wrong direction, probably. We have to stay more in the middle with it and know when to do shadow work and when not to, probably. And shadows, yes. What would be the most healthiest way to approach them?
To become conscious of them. Okay, so a shadow is essentially the unconscious. That's all it is. So years ago, Carl Jung essentially related consciousness to light, right? And therefore, what we are unconscious of is the shadow, which is the only reason that we call it, the shadow.
Yeah.
Most people hear that word and they think, "Ooh, it's all this scary stuff," right? Just what you're unconscious of, which, by the way, there's a lot of positive stuff you're not conscious of also. So the most important thing to do with shadows is to become conscious of them. Almost like you're taking a flashlight and shining it into the dark so as to see what is, right? Yeah. It's that simple. But when we see what is, right, after we see what is, we have to hear it, we have to feel it, we have to understand it, and we have to practice love around it, which is to take it as a part of ourselves. That's what to do with shadows.
Great. And what, if you want to kind of look at the positive vibration in this era right now, what would you say is the most dominant positive vibration?
Risk.
Mm-hmm.
Let me explain why.
Yes. Okay.
We're at an interesting place right now where the template for what worked no longer works. This is a combination between a lot of economic crisis happening around the world, which made it so that young people coming into this world no longer had a formula that worked for creating success in their life. So they became incredibly frustrated and almost like none of this is going to work, right? So you can think of it like them just dropping all of it and being like, okay, we're back at scratch. On top of that, you have the introduction of the information age, which changed literally everything. Humanity is doubling its information base at a rate that they, quite frankly, can't biologically handle. And it's changing the game and changing it so fast that there's no longer predictability in the world. There's all kinds of downsides to this.
Yeah.
But the major upside is that really there's nothing for people to lose anymore. And when people don't have something to lose, they can take big risks, and hopefully big risks in favor of what really matters to them most. So where you saw a lot of people following in their parents' footsteps and people doing the same thing in their 20s as they were doing in their 40s, you don't see a lot of that anymore. You see a lot of a lot of risk being taken, a lot of games being changed up, and so it's a very exciting period for people really really taking those risks that are going to enhance life, not only for the individual but also for mankind.
Oh, that's nice. So the courage is actually growing in the people.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, I mean, you could say that, but it doesn't take a lot of courage when you don't have anything to lose, right?
Well, that's true too. Yeah. Yeah, we probably need the pressure, obviously. Kind of. Yeah. I see. Well, is there something else you would like to share that's on your mind right now that I haven't asked, and it's about these topics?
No, I think I'm pretty satisfied.
Good. So then let's go to our little game, the incomplete sentences. Are you ready?
Yes.
Which I would like you to complete spontaneously. Okay. The first one. So then let's go to our little game, the incomplete sentences. Are you ready?
Yes.
Which I would like you to complete spontaneously. Okay. The first one is humanity needs.
Connection.
Being authentic means?
Knowing the self.
Suffering helps too.
Bring you to your personal truth.
Happiness is?
Everywhere.
Life is.
Contrast.
I am.
Full of Christmas spirit.
I wish I could.
I wish I could show humanity their potential.
I would never.
Eat an animal.
For the future, I wish.
The people understood that relationships is the foundation of everything. Everything they're looking for.
Mm-hmm. And love is.
The most difficult practice of all.
And now, if you would have the opportunity to share a message to everybody on the planet, what would that message be?
Don't let yourself be isolated. Life is hard enough when you're with people. You don't need to make it hard by isolating yourself. Besides, you literally never know what person you meet is going to have the answer to whatever it is that you've been looking for. So the message I would give people is to treat every single person in their life as a resource for something. Everyone's a resource for something. It's about what? It's about resourcing the right person for the right thing. So don't isolate yourself. Learn how to master relationships. Establish connection wherever you find it.
Very nice. Thank you so much for this message. And thanks for this interesting talk and all your insights that you have shared with us. Your teachings are so authentic, always so clear and so inspiring. Thanks so much for your work. And I wish you all the best. A Merry Christmas. And thanks for making humanity more whole and more aware. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Dear viewers at home, thanks also for watching and for your attention. You know, we're always really happy if you like our content and share them with your family and friends on social media platforms. And we're also really grateful if you send us some donations via our PayPal donation button on our website. Thank you so much for watching. All the best to you. Much love from Switzerland.